and lots to discuss in the next 15 before we jump into accountability. So I want to make sure we get through it. Amanda, I don't know if you had a chance to watch some of the replays, but this is the time where I give a little bit of a mentor moment, and feel free to chime in if something I say resonates, if something that I say spurs a question. That's what we're here for. If it goes a little bit over, then great. And then the next 15, starting at 9, we'll just talk about accountability and what we need to do to move forward each day. So welcome you all. Today, we're finishing off some of our interviewing topics, and we're going to talk a little bit more about company values. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. There was as 2020 was coming to an end, the COVID lockdown, I had a friend who was working in, and they'd been struggling. He's an attorney, and as they were struggling, they started to pick up a few clients outside of their avatar, right? And so some clients that weren't necessarily who they tended to target, and they really felt like they needed a spur of cash. And as they started bringing on some of these clients, they realized that some of these clients were doing some things that just felt a little on the borderline of legal, right? And so I'm sure you all can imagine in the world of attorneys that there are some attorneys that love to operate on the board of the borderline of legal, and some that want to stay really solidly in the line of legal and value based and heading forward. And so their business did get that spur of cash, and they started to grow. And the whole time, the guy that I'm speaking of kept progressively feeling more and more sick to his stomach about some of the things that he felt like he needed to do in order to retain that client's business, which was a large portion of their financial top line at this point. And finally, it came to a head where the client asked them to do some things, and they said that they wanted to do some things which were over the line as far as they were concerned, and a breakup had to happen. So I want you to kind of think about that in these terms. Another gentleman, actually a local gentleman that I know, as he was starting his business, a very similar thing. He went to start, had a client that he was working really well with for a long period of time. He felt like he needed to work 7 in the morning to to midnight on a regular basis, and his client actually expected that of him too. And as his business started to grow, and he realized that he valued his family more, and he wanted to make sure that he had time for his family, there came a time where the client said, "I need you to meet me at this potential investment property tomorrow." And this gentleman said, "Hey, I know that I've told you this in advance, and my family are going on vacation tomorrow. We leave at 6 a.m. I won't be able to see you there." And the potential client literally said, "Your personal life is starting to affect my business income. Either meet me there tomorrow, or I will find another realtor to work with." This gentleman did not meet him there, and again, set up cue for the breakup. So I bring this up. These are not, they don't feel like interview scenarios, right? Like what we're talking about, though, is values-based scenarios, and values help you to align with people who align with you. And I think Boilerplate, like as a movie, right? That Boiler Room movie, you know, with Vin Diesel and the guys all in the room, or Wolf on Wall Street. There sometimes there are certain things people will do to get business, and in order to grow a business, that I wouldn't be comfortable with. And as you're bringing people into your business, you need to know what things you value, and what actions you don't value, in order to continue to grow your business. If family values gets in the way of your protocol for growing your business, then like you need to know that in your interview. At the same time, if family values is how you want to grow your business, you should know that in the interview. Not from a bias perspective, but from an alignment perspective. I have a client who is trying to find a tech startup company consistently. He's tried a couple of times that doesn't expect him to work, 7 days a week on his beck and call, even when he's on vacation, needs to be on his phone and helping make deals go through, right? Because for him, that off time and the time to check out and go on an adventure and just not be tied to his phone is really important. He doesn't have a family, and that personal adventure time of just getting into the adrenaline and having some fun, that is important to him. And so, as he's looking to apply places, again, he's looking to add those values. So let's jump into it. For those that haven't had a chance to be in our calls in the past, one of the things that I'd love to have you do is register on bemoredaily.com. If you're already in our calendar appointment, you're already probably there. And what will happen is you'll get some emails, one of which will tie you to a Google Drive that gives you all the worksheets that we've talked about in the past. And anybody that's watching this live on Facebook or LinkedIn, likewise, if you register, you'll get the link to the Google Drive, and you'll also get the invite to attending these Zoom calls so you can join us live for the discussion. And, we were talking a little bit about clients, and we were also talking about candidates, because in my opinion, they're kind of the same thing, right? You should always be treating your candidates as if they're your next clients. In fact, most people that are going to be working for you should be your clients if they're aligned with what it is that you're doing and the product that you're selling, the services that you're providing. You would expect that the people that you're working with should be your raving fans. And that's really what this turns into, right? Is as we're growing, we know that it's going to start with us as leaders uh, treating others with value, whether they're a client or a candidate. The main thing we want to do as leaders is treat our people as if they're valuable. Imagine that, probably because they are, right? If we can lift people up as if they are valuable and not just a commodity, not just, a number on a spreadsheet. I had another friend that posted a nice long post recently about stop calling your people leverage. It may be true. I'm guilty of that. Like I encourage people to hire their own leverage, and it's a great point. Your people are your people, and they have a value. And so then we want to make sure that you're identifying yours. If you haven't identified your core values, I added to this Google Drive just last night an Excel sheet or a Google Sheets spreadsheet that has a list of about 280 values. And what it does, it's going to help you thin down your core values in a very simple way. You go through the list in column A, and you X off the ones that really call out to you. And then you move over to column B, and you're going to look at the ones that you X'd off that really called out to you, and you're going to thin that number down, right? Which are the 10 that call out to you now, and then which are the 3 that really bring you together. Now, some of these we're going to feel like they overlap a little bit. And what I've seen over the years is that inside myself, inside of core values, my top 10 has been pretty consistent, and the 3 for the year sometimes shifts up a little bit, right? They're usually pulled from the top 10. And depending on where I am in my business and what's happening in my family at that point in time, like family has always been important to me. And when my kids were not in school yet and they were toddlers at home, being home with them every minute of the day was less important, right? As my kids have started playing sports and being in musical performances, like I've wanted to be there more to support them. And so being home was more important. And so family shifted a little bit there over the years because having time with my family is more important now that I am supporting them in their growth efforts, right? And so something to think about as you're outlining your values too is your top 10. If you're having a trouble deciding, like, well, I love all of these top 10, it's really hard to filter out the 3. Look at your top 10 and say which 3 are more relevant today, more relevant this year, more relevant with the goals that I've put down for my next year in my business and personal life. Fair? Okay. All right. So I told you there's a lot to get through today. So here we go. Yes, I did that right. Okay. So what values are you going to operate by? Obviously, based on a couple of those stories that I just mentioned to you, these end up being kind of your North Star, right? Like these will be your compass for aligning with your client avatars and with your perfect candidates. So, I gave a couple of scenarios about what it was like for some of these people to work with people that did not align with values. What about you? Anybody on the call have a scenario, a time that they were working with a business and realized, hey, uh, what is important to me is not important to either my boss, or what's important to me is not important to one of my employees, or likewise, not important to a client, a time where you realize that your values came to a clash. Anyone want to share?
Just recently, I actually did not accept a job. I withdrew my application because I recognized that it was going to take a significant amount of time, uphill battle away from my family, my weekends, my evenings. The person in that role today is easily working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. And
Wow.
that's just not something that I want to do. So I've had to redefine my version of success, because for a long time I have had that up on a pedestal. But I'm learning that my family in my life is more important than work. So yeah, I'm realigning and redefining. It's a quite the transition period.
Yeah. Well, good for you for noticing before you took the job. So, uh, and recognizing the change that you're looking for in your life. So good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can talk about this past year, mainly over the summer. There was a client that I was doing work for, and it was I was actually being subcontracted out. So they really weren't my client, but they were scheduling me to do a lot of work for them. And they had very particular needs for their work. Long story short, they were I felt like they weren't respectful of my time. They were kind of ordering the services like they were shopping on Amazon,
Wow.
asking for things that normally I feel like a normal person would be like, "Hey, are you available for this? How does this work?" They really weren't considering my time, my life, my home life, and stuff like that. And because there was really no relationship there with me and this business, those two deciding factors, I kind of realized, hey, this just isn't a good fit. It's not working long term. I'm not happy, so I just decided. It was the first time I had to fire a client. It was a good learning experience.
Yeah, and again, good for you, right? Like, because that's not often how people do it. Sometimes they just sit in that pain and squirm around in it, right? So good for you for recognizing, because yes, your sanity is important. So we're gonna run through a couple of things, and Thomas, yours segue, both of you actually segue really well into this next portion of the list that we're gonna bullet point quickly and then move into our accountability section. And again, as always, this is something that we're happy to discuss more later on. Should there be more questions, if we need a second session, call it out and say, hey, I'd love to go through the bullet points more, a little bit more tomorrow, and we can do that, right? Like, this is a flexible schedule. Happy to spend some time there. And Thomas and Amanda, both of you kind of nailed it, in the sense that one of the things that we can do to make sure that we are finding values alignment, or expressing how our values should be aligned, as we kind of move forward, is to make sure that we have, set proper expectations with the persons that we're going to be working with, right? And so, if we're setting the right expectations and they're looking at the values that we're doing, in fact, I'm gonna do this a little bit different right now. I'm just gonna cut right to this so you guys can see the words. These are gonna be a little smaller. Um, if we're aligning correctly, then what you're gonna find is that we're gonna start to attract like-minded candidates, because as you find your values and as you put your values out there and start to work with people that and look for people that align with your values, you're going to find candidates and clients that line up that way. This is going to improve the interview process. We talked a little bit about not getting fooled by the answers. And when we get fooled by the answers, sometimes we get fooled by the energy and the rapport that's built. You will find that aligning with people that have values, again, in that army of me concept, people that have similar values to you, the interviews will feel much better, right? It won't be like pulling teeth. You're not going to like grimace at some of their responses for closing deals, because it's going to be a values alignment. You'll be creating internal ambassadors between your clients and your candidates, the employees that work for you. Again, like you've all been there. You've all found people that work at places that, they shout from the mountaintop that you should come try out their services because they're really excited about what it is that they do. And then you've got other places. This actually happened when I was working at Chuck E. Cheese. A tech manager of mine went to go work for a company called Jeepers that was local at the time. And he came back and said, Jeff, if I were you, I would never take my kid to these places. Their roller coaster rides inside are so messed up. I would never put one of my children on it. And like, so it's the opposite, right? He had high integrity over the condition of his equipment, and the place he was working didn't, and they weren't giving him the resources to get it finished. And he was literally telling people the opposite. Don't bring your families here. So again, values alignment. Obviously, it's going to reduce turnover and increase satisfaction inside of the team. And then final bullet point for this part, it's going to support consistent hiring of talent. Because again, like when you're setting the expectations in the beginning, when you're putting your talent out there, that's actually the part here. How do you implement? When you're putting your personal and corporate values out there for people to see on the wall in your building, inside of your job descriptions, when you're telling people in the screening interview and in the interview, these are our values. This is our mission statement. This is our vision statement. How do these make you feel? And you're getting that feedback, it's going to give you the right direction. And so what you want to do is also very similar to how we were talking about competency questions. Ask that in the interview process. When I was interviewing for large corporations that had a very specific vision statement, a very specific value statement, I would literally say what I just said to you. This is our vision statement. Tell me how you connect with that, right? Just very, very simple. These are our corporate values. How do you feel about those? And you'll hear the difference, right? Like somebody that really connects with corporate values is going to get excited about talking about the values. Somebody that's just answering the question is just going to answer the question, not excitement, and it's going to feel like pulling teeth. And that'll help you realize whether or not you're aligned on values with that individual. So anyway, incorporate values into your interviews, incorporate values into your interviews for candidates, and incorporate values into your interviews with clients, and you'll find that work is a lot more fun. So there we go. That's it for our live stream for today. We're going to jump right into our accountability session.